Hello, and welcome back to Storytime Classics Live, produced by Southwest Shakespeare Company. I am your host, Bo Heckman. Today we are continuing with The Valley of Fear, an adventure of Sherlock Holmes written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the final novel that Conan Doyle wrote in the Sherlock Holmes series, but not the final Sherlock Holmes story. In fact, this one, with its tale of a secret society and a mysterious murder, possibly a suicide, um, it introduces us to who we know later as Professor James Moriarty, Holmes' greatest nemesis. And he only appears in two or three Holmes novels, or stories, I should say. Uh, Although anything done outside of the Sherlock Holmes canon always includes Professor Moriarty as the villain most times. Um, anyway, right now in the story, we are flashing back to California during the gold rush, and it's best to just jump right back into it. If you have not seen any of the previous installments in this story, you can always find them on Southwest Shakespeare Company's YouTube page. So let me just jump right back in. Hope everyone is having a great Friday today. And we will just resume with The Valley of Fear, Part 2, Chapter 2, The Body Master. McMurdo was a man who made his mark quickly. Wherever he was, the folk around soon knew it. Within a week, he had become infinitely the most important person at Shafter's. There were 10 or a dozen boarders there, but they were honest foremen or commonplace clerks from the stores, of a very different caliber from the young Irishman. Of an evening when they gathered together, his joke was always the readiest, his conversation the brightest, and his song the best. He was born boon companion with a mag he was a born boon companion with a magneticism which drew good humor from all around him. And yet he showed again and again, as he had shown in the railway carriage, a capacity for sudden, fierce anger, which compelled the respect and even the fear of those who met him. For the law, too, and all who were connected with it. He exhibited a bitter contempt which delighted some and alarmed others of his fellow boarders. From the first, he made it evident, by his open admiration, that the daughter of the house had won his heart from the instant that he had set eyes upon her beauty and her grace. He was no backward suitor. On the second day, he told her that he loved her, and from then onward, he repeated the same story with an absolute disregard of what she might say to discourage him. Someone else, he would cry? Well, the worse luck for someone else. Let him look out for himself. Am I to lose my life's chance and all my heart's desire for someone else? You can keep on saying so, Etty. The day will come when you will say yes, and I'm young enough to wait. He was a dangerous suitor, with his glib Irish tongue and his pretty coaxing ways. There was about him also that glamour of experience and of mystery which attracts a woman's interest, and finally, her love. He could talk of the sweet valleys of County Monaghan, from which he came, of the lovely distant island, the low hills and green meadows of which seemed the more beautiful when imagination viewed them from this place of grime and snow. Then he was versed in the life of the cities of the North, of Detroit, and the lumber camps of Michigan, and finally of Chicago, where he had worked in a planing mill. And afterwards came the hint of romance, the feeling that strange things had happened to him in that great city, so strange and so intimate that they might not be spoken of. He spoke wistfully of a sudden leaving, a breaking of old ties, a flight into a strange world ending in this dreary valley. And Etty listened, her dark eyes gleaming with pity and with sympathy, those two qualities which may turn so rapidly and so naturally to love. McMurdo had obtained a temporary job as bookkeeper, for he was a well-educated man. This kept him out most of the day, and he had not found occasion yet to report himself to the head of the lodge of the Emmet Order of Freemen. He was reminded of his omission, however, by a visit one evening from Mike Scanlon, the fellow member whom he had met on the train. Scanlon, the small, sharp-faced, nervous, black-eyed man, seemed glad to see him once more. After a glass or two of whiskey, he broached the object of his visit. "Say, McMurdo," said he, "I remembered your address, so I made bold to call. I'm surprised that you've not reported to the bodymaster. Why haven't you seen Boss McGinty yet?" "Well, I had to find a job. I have been busy. You must find time for him if you have none for anything else. Good Lord, man, you're a fool not to have been down to the Union House and registered your name for the first morning after you came here. If you run against him, well, you mustn't. That's all." McMurdo showed mild surprise. "I've been a member of the lodge for over 2 years, Scanlon, but I never heard that duties were so pressing as all that. Maybe not in Chicago. Well, it's the same society here." "Is it?" Scanlon looked at him long and fixedly. There was something sinister in his eyes. "Isn't it? You tell me that in a month's time. You tell me that in a month's time. I hear you had a talk with the patrolman after I left the train." "How did you know that?" "Oh, it got about. Things do get about for good and for bad in this district. Well, yes. I told the hounds what I thought of them. By the Lord, you'll be a man after McGinty's heart. What, does he hate the police too?" Scanlon burst out laughing. "You go and see him, my lad," said he as he took his leave. "It's not the police, but you that he'll hate if you don't. Now, take a friend's advice and go at once." It chanced that on the same evening McMurdo had another more pressing interview which urged him in the same direction. It may have been that his attentions to Etty had been more evident than before, or that they had gradually obtruded themselves into the slow mind of his good German host. But, whatever the cause, the boarding-house keeper beckoned the young man into his private room and started on the subject without any circumlocution. "It seems to me sinister," said he, "that you're a-getting set on my Etty. Ain't that so, or am I wrong?" "Yes, that is so," the young man answered. "Well, I want to tell you right now that it ain't no matter of use. There's someone slipped in afore you. She told me so. Well, you can lay that she told you truth. But did she tell you who it was?" "No, I asked her, but she wouldn't tell." "I dare say not. The little baggage. Perhaps she did not wish to frighten you away." "Frighten?" McMurdo was on fire in a moment. "Ah, yes, my friend. You need not be ashamed to be frightened of him. It is Teddy Baldwin." "And who the devil is he?" "He is a boss of scourers." "Scourers? I've heard of them before. It's scourers here and scourers there, and always in a whisper." "What are you all afraid of? Who are the scourers?" The boarding-house keeper instinctively sank his voice, as everyone did who talked about that terrible society. "The scourers," said he, "are the eminent order of freemen." The young man started. "Why, I am a member of that order myself." "You? I would never have had you in my house if I had known it. Not if you were to pay me a week. Maybe in some places. Not here." "What is it here?" It is a murder society. That's what it is. McMurdo laughed incredulously. How can you prove that? He asked. Prove it. Are there not 50 members to prove it? What about Milman and Shorst, and the Nicholson family, and old Mr. Heim, and little Billy James and the others? Prove it. Is there a man or woman in this valley that does not know it? See here, said McMurdo earnestly. I want you to take back what you've said, or else make it good. One or the other you must do before I quit this room. Put yourself in my place. Here am I, a stranger in the town. I belong to a society that I know only as an innocent one. You'll find it through the length and breadth of the states, but always as an innocent one. Now, when I am counting upon joining it here, you tell me that it is the same as a murder society called the Scours. I guess you owe me either an apology or else an explanation, Mr. Shafter. I can but tell you what the whole world knows, mister. The bosses of the ones are the bosses of the other. If you offend the one, it is the other that will strike you. We have proved it too often. That's just gossip. I want proof, said McMurdo. If you live here long, you will get your proof. But I forget that you are yourself one of them. You will soon be as bad as the rest, but you will find other lodgings, mister. I cannot have you here. It is not bad enough that one of these people come courting my Etty, and that I dare not turn him down, but that I should have another for my boarder. Yes, indeed, you shall not sleep here after tonight. McMurdo found himself under sentence of banishment, both from his comfortable quarters and from the girl whom he loved. He found her alone in the sitting room, and that same evening, and he poured his troubles into her ear. Sure, your father is after giving me notice, he said. It's little I would care if it was just my room, but indeed, Etty, though it's only a week that I've known you, you are the very breath of life to me. I can't live without you. Oh, hush, Mr. McMurdo. Don't speak so, said the girl. I have told you, have I not, that you are too late. There is another, and if I have not promised to marry him at once, at least I can promise no one else. Suppose I had been first, Etty. Would I have had a chance? The girl sank her face into her hands. I wish to heaven that you had been first, she sobbed. McMurdo was down on his knees before her in an instant. For God's sake, Etty, let it stand at that, he cried. Will you ruin your life and my own for the sake of this promise? Follow your heart, Acushla. 'Tis a safer guide than any promise before you. 'Tis a safer guide than any promise before you knew what it was that you were saying. He had seized Etty's white hand before his own strong brown ones. Say that you will be mine, and we will face it out together. Not here? Yes, here. No, no, Jack. His arms were round her now. It could not be here. Could you take me away? A struggle passed for a moment over McMurdo's face, but it ended by setting like granite. No. Here, he said. I'll hold you against the world, Etty, right here, where we are. Why should we not leave together? No, Etty. I can't leave here. But why? I'd never hold my head up again if I felt that I had been driven out. Besides, who is there to be afraid of? And are we not free folks in a free country? If you love me and I you, who will dare to come between? You don't know, Jack. You've been here too short a time. You don't know this Baldwin. You don't know McGinty and his scourers. No, I don't know them, and I don't fear them, and I don't believe them, said McMurdo. I've lived among rough men, my darling, and instead of fearing them, it has always ended that they have feared me. Always, Etty. It's mad on the face of it. If these men, as your father says, have done crime after crime in the valley, And if everyone knows them by name, how comes it that none are brought to justice? You answer me that, Etty. Because no witness dares to appear against them. He would not live a month if he did. Also, because they have always their own men to swear that the accused one was far from the scene of the crime. But surely, Jack, you must have read all this. I had understood that every paper in the United States was writing about it. Well, I have read something, it is true, but I had thought it was a story. Maybe these men have some reason in what they do. Maybe they are wronged and have no other way to help themselves. Oh, Jack, don't let me hear you speak so. That is how he speaks. The other one, Baldwin, he speaks like that, does he? And that is why I loathe him so. Oh, Jack, now I can tell you the truth. I loathe him with all my heart, but I fear him also. I fear him for myself, but above all, I fear him for father. I know that some great sorrow would come upon us if I dared to say what I really felt. That is why I have put him off with half promises. It was in real truth or our only hope. But if you will fly with me, Jack, we could take father with us and live forever far from the power of these wicked men. Again, there was the struggle upon McMurdo's face, and again it set like granite. No harm shall come to you, Etty, nor to your father either. As to wicked men, I expect you may find that I am as bad as the worst of them before we're through. No, no, Jack, I would trust you anywhere. McMurdo laughed bitterly. Good Lord, how little you know of me. Your innocent soul, my darling, could not even guess what is passing in mine. But hello, who is this visitor? The door had opened suddenly, and a young fellow came swaggering in with the air of one who is the master. He was a handsome, dashing young man of about the same age and build as McMurdo himself. Under his broad-brimmed black felt hat, which he had not troubled to remove, a handsome face with a fierce, domineering eyes and a curved hawk bill of a nose looked savagely at the pair who sat by the stove. Etty had jumped to her feet full of confusion and alarm. I'm glad to see you, Baldwin, said she. You're earlier than I had thought. Come and sit down. Baldwin stood with his hands on his hips, looking at McMurdo. Who is this? He asked curtly. It is a friend of mine, Mr. Baldwin, a new boarder here, Mr. McMurdo. May I introduce you to Mr. Baldwin? The young men nodded in surly fashion to each other. Maybe Miss Etty has told you how it is with us, said Baldwin. I didn't understand that there was any relation between you. Didn't you? Well, you can understand it now. You can take it from me that this young lady is mine, and you will find it a very fine evening for a walk. Thank you. I am in no humor for a walk. Aren't you? The man's savage eyes were blazing with anger. Maybe you're in humor for a fight, Mr. Boarder. That I am, cried McMurdo, springing to his feet. You never said a more welcome word. For God's sake, Jack. Oh, for God's sake, cried poor distracted Ellie. Oh, Jack, Jack, he will hurt you. Oh, it's Jack, is it? Said Baldwin with an oath. You've come to that already, have you? Oh, Ted, be reasonable, be kind. For my sake, Ted, if ever you loved me, be big-hearted and forgiving. I think, Etty, that if you were to leave us alone, we would get this thing settled, said McMurdo quietly. Or maybe, Mr. Baldwin, you will take a turn down the street with me. It's a fine evening, and there's some open ground beyond the next block. I'll get even with you without needing to dirty my hands, said his enemy. You'll wish you had never set foot in this house before I'm through with you. No time like the present, cried McMurdo. I'll choose my own time, mister. You can leave the time to me. See here. He suddenly rolled up his sleeve and showed upon his forearm a peculiar sign which appeared to have been branded there. It was a circle with a triangle within it. Do you know what this means? I neither know nor care. Well, you will know, I promise you that. You won't be much older either. Perhaps Miss Etty can tell you something about it. As to you, Etty, you'll come back to me on your knees. D'ye hear, girl? On your knees. And then I'll tell you what your punishment may be. You've sowed, and by the Lord I'll see that you reap. You've sowed, and by the Lord I'll see that you reap. He glanced at them, both in fury. Then he turned upon his heel, and an instant later the outer door had banged behind him. For a few moments McMurdo and the girl stood in silence. Then she threw her arms around him. "Oh, Jack, how brave you were! But it's no use. You must fly. Tonight, Jack, tonight! It's your only hope. We will have your life. He will have your life. I read it in his horrible eyes. What chance have you against a dozen of them, with Boss McGinty and all the power of the lodge behind them?" McMurdo disengaged her hands, kissed her, and gently pushed her back into a chair. "There, Acushla, there. Don't be disturbed or fear for me. I am a freeman myself. I am after telling your father about it. Maybe I am no better than the others, so don't make a saint of me. Perhaps you hate me too, now that I have told you as much." "Hate you, Jack?" "While life lasts, I could never do that. I have heard that there is no harm in being a freeman anywhere but here. So why should I think the worse of you for that? But if you are a freeman, Jack, why should you not go down and make a friend of Boss McGinty? Oh, hurry, Jack, hurry! Get your word in first, or the hounds will be on your trail." "I was thinking the same thing," said McMurdo. "I'll go right now and fix it. You can tell your father that I'll sleep here tonight and find some other quarters in the morning." The bar of McGinty's saloon was crowded as usual, for it was the favorite loafing place of all the rougher elements of the town. The man was popular, for he had a rough, jovial disposition which formed a mask covering a great deal which lay behind it. But apart from this popularity, the fear in which was held throughout the township, and indeed down the whole 30 miles of the valley and past the mountains on each side of it, was enough in itself to fill this bar, for none could afford to neglect his goodwill. Besides those secret powers which it was universally believed that he exercised in so pitiless a fashion, he was a high public official, a municipal councillor, and a commissioner of roads, elected to the office through the votes of the ruffians who in turn expected to receive favors at his hands. Assessments and taxes were enormous. The public works were notoriously neglected. The accounts were slurred over by bribed auditors, and the decent citizen was terrorized into paying public blackmail and holding his tongue lest some worse thing befall him. Thus it was that, year by year, Boss McGinty's diamond pins became more obtrusive, his gold chains more weighty across a more gorgeous vest, and his saloon stretched farther and farther until it tethered to absorb one whole side of the market square. McMurdo pushed open the swinging door of the saloon and made his way amid the crowd of men within, through an atmosphere blurred with tobacco smoke and heavy with the smell of spirits. The place was brilliantly lighted, and the huge, heavy-lit mirrors upon every wall reflected and multiplied the garish illumination. There were several bartenders in their shirt sleeves, hard at work mixing drinks for the loungers who fringed the broad, brass-trimmed counter. At the far end, with his body resting upon the bar and a cigar stuck at an acute angle from the corner of his mouth, stood a tall, strong, heavy-built man who could be none other than the famous McGinty himself. He was a black-maned giant, bearded to the cheekbones, and with a shock of raven hair which fell to his collar. His complexion was as swarthy as that of an Italian, and his eyes were of a strange dead black, which combined with a slight squint gave them a particularly sinister appearance. All else in the man, His noble proportions, his fine features, and his frank bearing fitted in with that jovial man-to-man manner which he affected. Here, one would say, is a bluff, honest fellow whose heart would be sound however rude his outspoken words might seem. It was only when those dead, dark eyes, deep and remorseless, were turned upon a man that he shrank within himself, feeling that he was face to face with an infinite possibility of latent evil, with a strength and a courage and a cunning behind it, which made it 1,000 times more deadly. Having had a good look at his man, McMurdo elbowed his way forward with his usual careless audacity, and pushed himself through the little group of courtiers who were fawning upon the powerful boss, laughing uproariously at the smallest of his jokes. The young stranger's bold gray eyes looked back fearlessly through their glasses at the deadly black ones which turned sharply upon him. "Well, young man, I can't call your face to mind. I'm new here, McGinty. You are not so new that you can't give a gentleman his proper title." "He's Counselor McGinty, young man," said a voice from the group. "I'm sorry, Counselor. I'm strange to the ways of the place, but I was advised to see you." "Well, you see me. This is all there is. What do you think of me?" "Well, it's early days. If your heart is as big as your body, and your soul as fine as your face, then I'd ask for nothing better," said McMurdo. "By gar, you've got an Irish tongue in your head anyhow," cried the saloon-keeper, not quite certain whether to humor this audacious visitor or to stand upon his dignity. "So you are good enough to pass my appearance?" "Sure," said McMurdo. "And you were told to see me?" "I was." "And who told you?" "Brother Scanlon of Lodge 341, Vermissa." "I drank your health, Counselor. I drink your health, Counselor, and to our better acquaintance." He raised a glass with which he had been served to his lips and elevated his little finger as he drank it. McGinty, who had been watching him narrowly, raised his thick black eyebrows. "Oh, it's like that, is it?" said he. "I'll have to look a bit closer into this, Mr. McMurdo." "A bit closer, Mr. McMurdo, for we don't take folk on trust in these parts, nor believe all we're told, neither. Come in here for a moment behind the bar." There was a small room there, lined with barrels. McGinty carefully closed the door, and then seated himself on one of them, biting thoughtfully on his cigar and surveying his companion with those disquieting eyes. For a couple of minutes he sat in complete silence. McMurdo bore the inspection cheerfully, one hand on his coat pocket, the other twisting his brown mustache. Suddenly, McGinty stooped and produced a wicked-looking revolver. "See here, my joker," said he. "If I thought you were playing any game on us, it would be short work for you." "This is a strange welcome," McMurdo answered with some dignity, "for the bodymaster of a lodge of freemen to give to a stranger brother." "Aye, but it's just that same that you have to prove," said McGinty, "and God help you if you fail. Where were you made?" "Lodge 29, Chicago." "When?" "June 24th, 1872. "What, bodymaster? James H. Scott. Who is your district ruler?" "Bartholomew Wilson." You seem glib enough in your tests. What are you doing here?" "Working, the same as you, but a poorer job." You have your back answer quick enough?" "Yes, I was always quick of speech." "Are you quick of action?" I have had that name among those who knew me best." "Well, we may try you sooner than you think. Have you heard anything of the lodge in these parts?" "I have heard that it takes a man to be a brother." "True for you, Mr. McMurdo. Why did you leave Chicago?" "I am damned if I tell you that." McGinty opened his eyes. He was not used to being answered in such a fashion, and it amused him. Why won't you tell me? Because no brother may tell another a lie. Then the truth is too bad to tell? You can put it that way if you like. See here, mister, you can't expect me as a bodymaster to pass into the lodge a man whose past he can't answer. McMurdo looked puzzled. Then he took a worn newspaper cutting from an inner pocket. You wouldn't squeal on a fellow, said he. I'll wipe my hand across your face if you say such words to me, cried McGinty hotly. You are right, counselor, said McMurdo meekly. I should apologize. I spoke without thought. Well, I know that I am safe in your hands. Look at that clipping. McGinty glanced his eyes over the account of the shooting of one Jonas Pinto in the Lake Saloon, Market Street, Chicago, in the New Year week of 1874. Your work? He asked, as he handed back the paper. McMurdo nodded. Why did you shoot him? I was helping Uncle Sam to make dollars. Maybe mine were not as good gold as his, but they looked as well and they were cheaper to make. This man Pinto helped me to shove the queer... To do what? Well, it means to pass the dollars out into circulation. Then he said he would split. Maybe he did split. I didn't wait to see. I just killed him and lighted out for the coal country. Why the coal country? Because I'd read in the papers that they weren't too particular in those days. McGinty laughed. You were first a coiner and then a murderer, and you came to these parts because you thought you'd be welcome. That's about the size of it, McMurdo answered. Well, I guess you'll go far. Say, can you make those dollars yet? McMurdo took a half dozen from his pocket. Those never passed the Philadelphia Mint, said he. You don't say. McGinty held them to the light in his enormous hand, which was hairy as a gorilla's. I can see no difference, Gar. You'll be a mighty useful brother. I'm thinking. We can do with a bad man or two among us, friend McMurdo, for there are times when we have to take our own part. We'd soon be against the wall if we didn't shove back at those that were punishing us. Well, I guess I'd do my share of shoving with the rest of the boys. You seem to have a good nerve. You didn't squirm when I shoved this gun at you. It was not me that was in danger. Who then? It was you, counselor. McMurdo drew a cocked pistol from the side pocket of his jacket. I was covering you all the time. I guess my shot should have been as quick as yours. By gar, Ginty flushed an angry red and then burst into a roar of laughter. Say, we'd have no such holy terror come to hand this many a year. I reckon the lodge will learn to be proud of you. Well, what the hell do you want? And can't I speak alone with the gentleman for 5 minutes, but you must butt in on us? The bartender stood abashed. I'm sorry, counselor, but it's Ted Baldwin. He says he must see you this very minute. The message was unnecessary, for the set, cruel face of the man himself was looking over the servant's shoulder. He pushed the bartender out and closed the door on him. So, said he with a furious glance at McMurdo, you got here first, did you? I have a word to say to you, counselor, about this man. Then say it here and now before my face, cried McMurdo. I'll say it at my own time in my own way. Tut, tut, said McGinty, getting off his barrel. That will never do. We have a new brother here, Baldwin, and it's not for us to greet him in such a fashion. Hold out your hand, man, and make it up. Never, cried Baldwin in a fury. I've offered to fight him if he thinks I have wronged him, said McMurdo. I'll fight him with fists, or, if that won't satisfy him, I'll fight him any other way he chooses. Now, I'll leave it to you, counselor, to judge between us as a bodymaster should. What is it, then? A young lady. She's free to choose for herself. Is she? Cried Baldwin. As between two brothers of the lodge, I should say that she was, said the boss. Oh, that's your ruling, is it? Yes, it is, Ted Baldwin, said McGinty with a wicked stare. It is you that would dispute it. You would throw over one that has stood by you this 5 years in favor of a man that you never saw before in your life? You're not a body master for life, Jack McGinty, and by God, when next it comes to a vote. The counselor sprang at him like a tiger. His hand closed round the other's neck, and he hurled him back across one of the barrels. In his mad fury, he would have squeezed the life out of him if McMurdo had not interfered. Easy, counselor. For heaven's sake, go easy, he cried as he dragged him back. McGinty realized his hold, and Baldwin, cowed and shaken, gasping for breath and shivering in every limb as one who has looked over the gray edge of death, sat up on the barrel over which he had been hurled. You've been asking for this many a day, Ted Baldwin. Now you've got it, cried McGinty, his huge chest rising and falling. Maybe you think if I was voted down from a body master, you would find yourself in my shoes. It's for the lodge to say that. But so long as I am the chief, I'll have no man lift his voice against me or my rulings. I have nothing against one. Well then, cried the other, relapsing in a moment into a bluff joviality, we're all good friends again, and there's an end of the matter. Well then, cried the other. He took a bottle of champagne down from the shelf and twisted out the cork. See now, he continued, as he filled 3 high glasses, let us drink the quarreling toast of the lodge. After that, as you know, there can be no bad blood between us. Now then, the left hand on the apple of my throat, I say to you, Ted Baldwin, what is the offense, sir? The clouds are heavy, answered Baldwin, but they will forever brighten. And this I swear. The men drank their glasses, and the same ceremony was performed between Baldwin and McMurdo. There, cried McGinty, rubbing his hands, that's the end of the black blood. You come under lodge discipline if it goes further, and that's a heavy hand in these parts, as Brother Baldwin knows. And as you will damn soon find out, Brother McMurdo, if you ask for trouble. Faith, I'd be slow to do that, said McMurdo. He held out his hand to Baldwin. I'm quick to quarrel and quick to forgive. It's my hot Irish blood, they tell me, but it's over for me, and I bear no grudge. Baldwin had to take the proffered hand, for the baleful eye of the terrible boss was upon him. But his sullen face showed how little the words of the other had moved him. McGinty clapped them both on the shoulders. Tut, these girls, he cried. To think that the same petticoats could come between 2 of my boys. It's the devil's own luck. Well, it's the Colin inside of them that must settle the question. For it's outside the jurisdiction of a body master, and the Lord be praised for that. We have enough on us, without the women as well. You'll have to be affiliated to Lodge 341, Brother McMurdo. We have our own ways and methods, different from Chicago. Saturday night is our meeting, and if you come then, we'll make you free forever of the Vermissa Valley. Chapter 3, Lodge 341, Vermissa. On the day following the evening, which had contained so many exciting events, McMurdo moved his lodgings from old Jacob Shafter's and took up his quarters at the widow McNamara's on the extreme outskirts of the town. Scanlon, his original acquaintance aboard the train, had occasion shortly afterwards to move into Vermissa and to the 2 lodged together. There was no other boarder, as the hostess was an easy-going old Irishwoman who left them to themselves, so that they had a freedom for speech and action welcome to men who had secrets in common. Shafter had relented to the extent of letting McMurdo come to his meals there when he liked, so that his intercourse with Etty was by no means broken. On the contrary, it grew closer and more intimate as the weeks went by. In his bedroom, As his new abode, McMurdo felt it safe to take out the coining molds, and under many a pledge of secrecy, a number of brothers from the lodge were allowed to come in and see them, each carrying away in his pocket some examples of the false money, so cunningly struck that there was never the slightest difficulty or danger in passing it. Why, with such a wonderful art at his command, McMurdo should condescend to work at all was a perpetual mystery to his companions, though he made it clear to anyone who asked him that if he lived without any visible means, it would very quickly bring the police upon his track. One policeman was indeed after him already, but the incident, as luck would have it, did the adventurer a great deal more good than harm. After the first introduction, there were a few evenings when he did not find his way to McGinty's saloon, there to make closer acquaintance with the boys, which was the jovial title by which the dangerous gang who infested the place were known to one another. His dashing manner and fearlessness of speech made him a favorite with them all, while the rapid and scientific way in which he polished off his antagonist in an all-in barroom scrap earned the respect of that rough community. Another incident, however, raised him even higher in their estimation. Just at the crowded hour one night, the door opened and a man entered with the quiet blue uniform and peaked cap of the mine police. This was a special body raised by the railways and colliery owners to supplement the efforts of the ordinary civil police, who were perfectly helpless in the face of the organized ruffianism which terrorized the district. There was a hush as he entered, and many a curious glance was cast at him. But the relations between policemen and criminals are peculiar in some parts of the states, and McGinty himself, standing behind his counter, showed no surprise when the policeman enrolled himself among his customers. A straight whiskey for the night is bitter. A straight whiskey for the night is bitter, said the police officer, and don't think we have met before, Counselor. I don't think we've met before, Counselor. You'll be the new captain, said McGinty. That's so. We're looking to you, Counselor, and to the other leading citizens to help us in upholding law and order in this township. Captain Marvin is my name. We'd do better without you, Captain Marvin, said McGinty coldly, for we have our own police of the township, and no need for any imported goods. What are you but the paid tool of the capitalists hired by them to club or shoot your poorer fellow citizen? Well, well, we won't argue about that, said the police officer good-humoredly. I expect we all do our duty same as we see it, but we can't all see it the same. He had drunk off his glass and had turned to go when his eyes fell upon the face of Jack McMurdo, who was scowling at his elbow. Hello, hello, he cried, looking him up and down. Here's an old acquaintance. McMurdo shrank away from him. I was never a friend to you, nor any other cursed copper in my life, said he. An acquaintance isn't always a friend, said the police captain, grinning. You're Jack McMurdo of Chicago, right enough, and don't you deny it. McMurdo shrugged his shoulders. I'm not denying it, said he. Do you think I'm ashamed of my own name? You've got good cause to be, anyhow. What the devil do you mean by that? He roared with his fists clenched. No, Jack, bluster. No, Jack, bluster won't do with me. I was an officer in Chicago before I ever came to this darned coal bunker, and I know a Chicago crook when I see one. McMurdo's face fell. Don't tell me that you're Marvin of Chicago Central, he cried. Just the same old Teddy Marvin at your service. We haven't forgotten the shooting of Jonas Pinto up there. I never shot him. Did you not? That's good impartial evidence, ain't it? Well, his death came in uncommon handy for you, or they would have had you for shoving the queer. We can let that be bygones, for between you and me, and perhaps I'm going further than my duty saying it, They could get no clear case against you, and Chicago's open to you tomorrow. I'm very well where I am. Well, I've given you the pointer, and you're a sulky dog not to thank me for it. Well, I suppose you mean well, and I do thank you, said McMurdo in no very gracious manner. It's mum with me so long as I see you living on the straight, said the captain. But, by the Lord, if you get off after this, it's another story. So good night to you, and good night, counselor. He left the barroom, but not before he had created a local hero. McMurdo's deeds in far Chicago had been whispered before. He had put off all questions with a smile as one who did not wish to have greatness thrust upon him. But now the thing was officially confirmed. The bar loafers crowded around him and shook him heartily by the hand. He was free of the community from that time on. He could drink hard and show a little trace of it, but that evening, had his mate Scanlon not been at hand to lead him home, the feted hero would surely have spent his night under the bar. On a Saturday night, McMurdo was introduced to the lodge. He had thought to pass it without ceremony as being an initiate of Chicago, but there were particular rites in Vermissa of which they were proud, and these had to be undergone by every postulant. The assembly met in a large room preserved for such purposes at the Union House. Some 60 members assembled at Vermissa, but that by no means represented the full strength of the organization, for there were several other lodges in the valley, and others across the mountains on each side, who exchanged members when any serious business was afoot, so that a crime might be done by men who were strangers to that locality. Altogether, there were not less than 500 scattered over the coal district. In the bare assembly room, the men were gathered round a long table. At the side was a second one laden with bottles and glasses, on which some members of the company were already turning their eyes. McGinty sat at the head with a flat black velvet cap upon his shock of tangled black hair, and a colored purple stole around his neck, so that he seemed to be a priest residing over some diabolical ritual. To right and left of him were the higher lodge officials, the cruel, handsome face of Ted Baldwin among them. Each of these wore some scarf or medallion as emblem of his office. They were, for the most part, men of mature age, but the rest of the company consisted of young fellows from 18 to 25, the ready and capable agents who carried out the commands of their seniors. Among the older men were many whose features showed the tigerish, lawless souls within, but looking at the rank and file, it was difficult to believe that these eager and open-faced young fellows were in very truth a dangerous gang of murderers, whose minds had suffered such complete moral perversion that they took a horrible pride in their proficiency at the business, and looked with deepest respect at the man who had the reputation of making what they called a clean job. To their contorted natures, it had become a spirited and chivalrous thing to volunteer for service against some man who had never injured them, and whom in many cases they had never seen in their lives. The crime committed, they quarreled as to who had actually struck the fatal blow, and amused one another and the company by describing the cries and contortions of the murdered man. At first, they had shown some secrecy in their arrangements, but at the time which this narrative describes their proceedings were extraordinarily open, for the repeated failure of the law had proved to them that, on the one hand, no one would dare to witness against them, and on the other, they had an unlimited number of stanch witnesses upon whom they could call, and a well-filled treasure chest from which they would draw the funds to engage the best legal talent in the state. In 10 long years of outrage, there had been no single conviction, and the only danger that ever threatened the Scourers lay in the victim himself, who, however outnumbered and taken by surprise, might and occasionally did leave his mark upon his assailants. McMurdo had been warned that some ordeal lay before him, but no one would tell him in what it consisted. He was led now to an outer room by two solemn brothers. Through the plank portion he could hear the murmur of many voices from the assembly within. Once or twice he caught the sound of his own name, and he knew that they were discussing his candidacy. Then there entered an inner guard with a green and gold sash across his chest. The bodymaster orders that he shall be trussed, blinded, and entered, said he. The three of them removed his coat, turned up the sleeve of his right arm, and finally pressed a rope round above the elbows and made it fast. They next placed a thick black cap right over his head and the upper part of his face, so that he could see nothing. He was then led into the assembly hall. It was pitch dark and very oppressive under his hood. He heard the rustle and murmur of the people round him, and then the voice of McGinty sounded dull and distant through the covering of his ears. "John McMurdo," said the voice, "are you already a member of the ancient order of freemen?" He bowed in assent. "Is your lodge number 29, Chicago?" He bowed again. "Dark nights are unpleasant," said the voice. "Yes, for strangers to travel," he answered. "The clouds are heavy." "Yes, a storm is approaching." "Are the brethren satisfied?" asked the bodymaster. There was a general murmur of assent. "We know, brother, by your sign and by your countersign, that you are indeed one of us," said McGinty. We would have you know, however, that in this country and in other countries of these parts, we have certain rights and also certain duties of our own which call for good men. Are you ready to be tested?" "I am." "Are you of stout heart?" "I am." "Take a stride forward to prove it." As the words were said, he felt two hard points in front of him, his eyes pressing upon them, so that it appeared as if he could not move forward without a danger of losing them. None the less, he nerved himself to step resolutely out, and as he did so, the pressure melted away. There was a low murmur of applause. "He is of stout heart," said the voice. "Can you bear pain?" "As well as another," he answered. "Test him." It was all he could do to keep himself from screaming out, for an agonizing pain shot through his forearm. He nearly fainted at the sudden shock of it, but he bit his lip and clenched his hands to hide his agony. I can take more than that," said he. This time there was a loud applause. A finer first appearance had never been made in the lodge. Hands clapped him on the back, and the hood was plucked from his head. He stood blinking and smiling amid the congratulations of the brothers. "One last word, Brother McMurdo," said McGinty. "You have already sworn the oath of secrecy and fidelity, and you are aware that the punishment for any breach of it is instant and inevitable death." "I am," said McMurdo. "And you accept the rule of the bodymaster for the time being under all circumstances?" "I do." "Then, in the name of Lodge 341 Vermissa, I welcome you and its privileges and debates. You will put the liquor on the table, Brother Scanlon, and we will drink to our worthy brother." McMurdo's coat had been brought to him, but before putting it on, he examined his right arm, which still smarted heavily. There, on the flesh of the forearm, was a circle with a triangle within it, deep and red as the burning iron had left it. One or two of his neighbors pulled up their sleeves and showed their own lodge marks. "We have all had it," said one, "but not all as brave as you over it." "Tut, it was nothing," said he. "It burned and ached all the time, all the same." When the drinks, which followed the ceremony of initiation, had all been disposed of, the business of the lodge proceeded. McMurdo, accustomed only to the prosaic performances of Chicago, listened with open ears and more surprised than he ventured to show to what followed. "The first business on the agenda paper," said McGinty, "is to read the following letter from Division Master Windle of Merton County Lodge 249. He says, 'Dear Sir, there is a job to be done on Andrew Ray of Ray and Sturmash, coal owners near this place. You will remember that your lodge owes us a return, having had the service of 2 brethren in the matter of the patrolman last fall. You will send 2 good men. They will be taken charge of by Treasurer Higgins of this lodge, whose address you know. He will show them when to act and where. Yours in freedom, J.W. Windle, DMAOF. Windle has never refused us when we have had occasion to ask for the loan of a man or 2, and it is not for us to refuse him." McGinty paused and looked around the room with his dull, malevolent eyes. "Who will volunteer for the job?" Several young fellows held up their hands. The bodymaster looked at them with an approving smile. "You'll do, Tiger Cormac. If you handle it as well as you did the last, you won't be wrong. And you, Wilson." "I've no pistol," said the volunteer, a mere boy in his teens. "Is it your first, is it not? Well, you have to be bloodied sometime. It will be a great start for you. As to the pistol, you'll find it waiting for you, or I'm mistaken. If you'll report yourselves on Monday, it will be time enough. You'll get a great welcome when you return." "Any reward this time?" asked Cormac, a thick-set, dark-faced, brutal-looking young man, whose ferocity had earned him the nickname of Tiger. "Never mind the reward. You just do it for the honor of the thing. Maybe when it's done, there will be a few odd dollars at the bottom of the box." "What has the man done?" asked young Wilson. "Sure, it is not for the likes of you to ask what the man has done. He has been judged over there. That's no business of ours. All we have to do is carry it out for them, same as they would do for us. Speaking of that, 2 brothers from the Merton Lodge are coming over to us next week to do some business in this quarter." "Who are they?" asked someone. "Faith, it is wiser not to ask. If you know nothing, you can testify nothing, and no trouble can come of it. But they are men who will make a clean job when they are about it." "Owing him." "And time, too," cried Ted Baldwin. "Folk are getting out of hand in these parts. It was only last week that 3 of our men were turned off by Foreman Blaker. It's been owing him a long time, and he'll get it full and proper." "Get what?" McMurdo whispered to his neighbor. "The business end of a buckshot cartridge," cried the man with a loud laugh. "What think you of our ways, brother?" McMurdo's criminal soul seemed to have already absorbed the spirit of the vile association in which he was now a member. "I like it well," said he. "'Tis a proper place for a lad of metal." Several of those who sat around heard his words and applauded them. "What's that?" cried the black-maned bodymaster from the end of the table. "'Tis our new brother, sir, who finds our ways to his—" McMurdo rose to his "I would say, eminent bodymaster, that if a man should be wanted, I should take it as an honor to be chosen to help the lodge." There was a great applause at this. It was felt that a new sun was pushing its rim above the horizon. To some of the elders, it seemed that the progress was little too rapid. "I would prove," said the secretary, Harroway, a vulture-faced old graybeard who sat near the chairman, "that Brother McMurdo should wait until it is the good pleasure of the lodge to employ him." "Sure, that was what I meant. I'm in your hands," said McMurdo. "Your time will come, brother," said the chairman. "We have marked you down as a willing man, and we believe that you will do good work in these parts. There is a small matter tonight in which you may take a hand if it so please you. I will wait for something that is worthwhile. You can come tonight anyhow, and it will help you know what we stand for in this community. I will make the announcement later. Meanwhile," he glanced at his agenda paper, "I have 1 or 2 more points to bring before the meeting. First of all, I will ask the treasurer as to our bank balance. There is the pension to Jim Carraway's widow. He was struck down doing the work of the lodge, and it is for us to see that she is not the loser. Jim was shot last month when they tried to kill Chester Wilcox of Marley Creek, McMurdo's neighbor informed him. The funds are good for the moment, said the treasurer. With the bank book in front of him, the firms have been generous of late. Max Linder and Company paid $500 to be left alone. Walker Brothers sent in $100, but I took it on myself to return it and ask for $5. If I do not hear by Wednesday, their winding gear may get out of order. We had to burn their breaker last year before they became reasonable. Then the West Section Coaling Company has paid its annual contribution. We have had enough on hand to meet any obligations. What about Archie Swindon? Asked a brother. He has sold out and left the district. The old devil left a note for us to say that he had rather be a free crossing sweeper in New York than a large mine owner under the power of a ring of blackmailers. By gar, it was as well that he made a break for it before the note reached us. I guess he won't show his face in this valley again. An elderly, clean-shaved man with a kindly face and a good brow rose from the end of the table which faced the chairman. Mr. Treasurer, he asked, may I ask who has brought the property of this man that we have driven out of the district? Yes, Brother Morris, it has been bought by the State and Merton Country Railroad Company. And who bought the mines of Todman and of Lee that came into the market on the same way last year? The same company, Brother Morris. And who bought the ironworks of Manson and of Schumann and of Van Deer and of Atwood, which have all been given up of late? They were all bought by the West Gilmerton General Mining Company. I don't see, Brother Morris, said the chairman, that it matters to us who buys them, since they can't carry them out of the district. With all respect to you, eminent bodymaster, I think it may matter very much to us. This process has been going on now for 10 long years. We are gradually driving all the small men out of trade. What is the result? We find in their places great companies like the railroad or the General Iron who have their directors in New York or Philadelphia and care nothing for our threats. We can take it out of their local bosses, but it only means that others will be sent in their stead, and we are making it dangerous for ourselves. The small men could not harm us. They had not the money nor the power, nor so long as we did not squeeze them too dry, they would stay on under our power. But if these big companies find that we stand between them and their profits, they will spare no pains and no expense to hunt us down and bring us to court. There was a hush at these ominous words, and every face darkened as gloomy looks were exchanged. So omnipotent and unchallenged had they been that the very thought that there was possible retribution in the background had been banished from their minds. And yet the idea struck a chill to the most reckless of them. It is my advice, the speaker continued, that we go easier upon the small men. On the day that they have been driven out, the power of this society will have been broken. Unwelcome truths are not popular. There were angry cries as the speaker resumed his seat. McGinty rose with a gloom upon his brow. Brother Morris, said he, you are always a croaker. So long as the members of this lodge stand together, there is no power in the United States that can touch them. Sure, we have not tried it often enough in the law courts. I expect the big companies will find it easier to pay than to fight, same as the little companies do. And now, brethren, McGinty took off his black velvet cap and stole as he spoke. This lodge is finished in its business for the evening, save for one small matter which may be mentioned when we are parting. The time has now come for fraternal refreshment and for harmony. Strange indeed it's human nature. Strange indeed is human nature. Here were these men whom murder was familiar, who again and again had struck down the father of the family, some man against whom they had no personal feeling, without one thought of compunction or compassion for his weeping wife or helpless children. And yet the tender or pathetic in music could move them to tears. McMurdo had a fine tenor voice, and if he had failed to gain the goodwill of the lodge before, it could no longer have been withheld after he had thrilled them with "I'm Sitting on the Stile, Mary," and "On the Banks of Allan Water." In his very first night, the new recruit had made himself one of the most popular of the brethren, marked already for advancement and high office. There were other qualities needed, however, besides those of good fellowship, to make a worthy freeman, and of these he was given an example before the evening was over. The whiskey bottle had passed round many times, and the men were flushed and ripe for mischief when their bodymaster rose once more to address them. "Boys," said he, "there is one man in this town that wants trimming up, and it's for you to see that he gets it. I'm speaking of James Stanger of the Herald. You've seen how he's been opening his mouth against us again." There was a murmur of assent. With many a muttered oath, McGinty took a slip of paper from his waistcoat pocket. "Law and order. That's how he heads it. Reign of terror in the coal and iron district. 12 years have now elapsed since the first assassinations which proved the existence of a criminal organization in our midst. From that day, these outrages have never ceased, until now they've reached a pitch which makes us the opprobrium of the civilized world. It is for such results as this that our great country welcomes it to its bosom, the alien who flies from the despotisms of Europe. Is it that they shall themselves become tyrants over the very men who have given them shelter, and that the state of terrorism and lawlessness should be established under the very shadow of the sacred folds of the starry flag of freedom, which would raise horror in our minds if we read of it as existing under the most effete monarchy of the East? The men are known. The organization is patent and public. How long are we to endure it? Can we forever live? Sure. I've read enough of the slush, cried the chairman, tossing the paper down upon the table. That's what he says of us. The question I'm asking you is, what shall we say to him? Kill him, cried a dozen fierce voices. I protest against that, said Brother Morris, the man of the good brow and shaved face. I tell you, brethren, that our hand is too heavy in this valley, and that there will come a point where in self-defense every man will unite to crush us out. James Stanger is an old man. He is respected in the township and in the district. His paper stands for all that is solid in the valley. If that man is struck down, there will be a stir through this state and will only end with our destruction. And how would they bring about our destruction, Mr. Standback? Cried McGinty. Is it by the police? Sure. Half of them are in our pay and half of them afraid of us. Or is it by the law courts and the judge? Haven't we tried that before? Now, and whatever came of it? There is a Judge Lynch that might try the case, said Brother Morris. A general shout of anger greeted the suggestion. I have but to raise my finger, cried McGinty, and I could put 200 men into this town that would clear it out from end to end. Then suddenly raising his voice and bending his huge black brows into terrible frown. See here, Brother Morris, I have my eye on you, and have had for some time. You've no heart yourself, and you try to take the heart out of others. It will be an ill day for you, Brother Morris, when your own name comes on our agenda paper, and I'm thinking that it's just there and I ought to place it. Morris had turned deadly pale, and his knees seemed to give way under him as he fell back into his chair. He raised his glass in his trembling hand and drank before, he could answer. I apologize, eminent bodymaster, to you and every brother in this lodge, if I have said more than I should. I am a faithful member. You all know that. And it is my fear lest evil come to the lodge which makes me speak in anxious words. But I have greater trust in your judgment than in my own, eminent bodymaster, and I promise you that I will not offend again. The bodymaster's scowl relaxed as he listened to the humble words. Very good, Brother Morris. It's myself that would be sorry if it were needful to give you a lesson. But so long as I am in this chair, we shall be a united lodge in word and deed. And now, boys, he continued, looking round at the company, I'll say this much, that if Stanger got his full deserts, there would be more trouble than we need ask for. These editors hang together, and every journal in the state will be crying out for the police and troops. But I guess you can give him a pretty severe warning. Will you fix it, Brother Baldwin? Sure, said the young man eagerly. How many will you take? Half a dozen, and 2 to guard the door. You'll come, Gower, and you, Mansell, and you, Scanlon, and the 2 Willoughbys. I promised the new brother he should go, said the chairman. Ted Baldwin looked at McMurdo with eyes which showed that he had not forgotten nor forgiven. Well, he can come if he wants, he said in a surly voice. That's enough. The sooner we get to work, the better. The company broke up with shouts and yells and snatches of drunken song. The bar was still crowded with revelers, and many of the brethren remained there. The little band who had been told off for duty passed out into the street, proceeding in 2s and 3s along the sidewalk so as not to provoke attention. It was a bitterly cold night, with a half-moon shining brilliantly in a frosty, star-spangled sky. The men stopped and gathered in a yard which faced a high building. The words Vermissa Herald were printed in gold lettering between the brightly lit windows. From within came the clanking of the printing press. Here, you, said Baldwin to McMurdo. You can stand below at the door and see if the road is kept open for us. Arthur Willoughby can stay with you. You others come with me. Have no fears, boys, for we have a dozen witnesses that we are in the Union Bar at this very moment. It was nearly midnight, and the street was deserted save for 1 or 2 revelers upon their way home. The party crossed the road, and pushing open the door of the newspaper office, Baldwin and his men rushed in and up the stair which faced them. McMurdo and another remained below. From the room above came a shout, a cry for help, and then the sound of trampling feet and of falling chairs. An instant later, a gray-haired man rushed out onto the landing. He was seized before he could get farther, and his spectacles came tinkling down to McMurdo's feet. There was a thud and a groan. He was on his face, and a half a dozen sticks were clattering together as they fell upon him. He writhed, and his long, thin limbs quivered under the blows. The others ceased at last, but Baldwin, his cruel face set in an infernal smile, was hacking, which he vainly endeavored to defend with his arms. His white hair was dabbed with patches of blood. Baldwin was still stooping over his victim, putting in a short, vicious blow whenever he could see a part exposed, when McMurdo dashed up the stair and pushed him back. You'll kill the man. Baldwin, amazement. Curse you, he cried. Who are you to interfere? You that are new to the lodge, stand back. He raised his stick, but McMurdo had whipped his pistol out of his jacket. Stand back yourself, he cried. I'll blow your face in if you lay a hand on me. As to the lodge, wasn't the order of the bodymaster that the man was not to be killed? And what are you doing but... The truth, he says, remarked one of the men. By God, you'd best hurry yourselves, cried the man below. The windows are all lighting up, and you'll have the whole town here inside of 5 minutes. There was indeed the sound of shouting in the street, and a little group of compositors and pressmen was forming in the hall below and nerving itself into action. Leaving the limp and motionless body of the editor at the head of the stair, the criminals rushed down and made their way swiftly along the street. Having reached the Union House, some of them mixed with the crowd in McGinty's saloon, whispering across the job had been well carried through. Others, and among them McMurdo, broke away into side streets, and so by devious paths to their own homes. And we will stop here today, and we'll check my message board to see if there are messages. There are no messages today. Okay, I do encourage discussion and comments on the story. So if you feel so little technical difficulties there, I guess. Anyway, thank you for tuning in today. And if you are going out today, please be safe and wear a mask. Thank you. We'll see you next time on Storytime Classics Live.